There is a plant growing in parts of Europe right now that produces more food per square foot than most vegetables in your garden. It comes back every single year without you replanting it. It spreads on its own. It survives drought, frost, and neglect. And almost nobody is growing it. Why? Because somewhere along the way, the gardening industry decided you should buy seeds every spring. They decided you should depend on annual crops that die every winter so you come back to the store next year. And the plants that could feed your family for decades with almost no effort, they got quietly pushed to the side. Today that changes. By the end of this video, you are going to know 10 plants that behave exactly like weeds but feed you like crops. They are tough, they spread, they survive without much help. But instead of just taking up space, they give you food, year after year, for the rest of your life. And the last plant on this list is one that gardeners in the 1800s called their most valuable possession, yet almost no one is talking about it today. Stay with me, because number 7 alone is worth the entire video. Plant number 1. Sea Kale. Imagine a plant that pushes through frozen ground every single spring without you doing anything. You do not water it into existence. You do not start it in little trays on your windowsill. It just comes back. Like it has somewhere to be. That plant is Sea Kale, and it is one of the most impressive food plants almost no gardener knows about. Sea Kale is a perennial. That means once you plant it, it lives for years and years, sometimes decades, without needing to be replanted. It grows naturally along the rocky coastlines of Europe, which tells you something very important about its personality. This plant did not grow up in a soft, comfortable garden bed with rich soil and regular watering. It grew up in rocks, wind, salt spray, and harsh weather. That is its home. That is where it is comfortable. So when you plant Sea Kale in your garden, you are not babysitting something fragile. You are giving a tough, experienced survivor a place to live. Now here is the part that will surprise you. In early spring, before the leaves fully open, Sea Kale sends up these beautiful pale shoots. They look almost like pale broccoli or thick white asparagus. Gardeners throughout history used to cover the plant in early spring to block out the light. This process is called blanching, and it makes those shoots tender and mild, almost sweet. They taste somewhere between cabbage and asparagus, and you can cook them exactly the same way. But the eating does not stop there. Later in the season, Sea Kale sends up flower buds, and those flower buds are also edible. They taste remarkably similar to broccoli. Then the leaves come in, and those are edible too, though they are a bit more bitter and do better cooked than raw. One plant. Multiple harvests. 0 replanting. Sea Kale was a well-known and respected food plant in England during the 1700s and 1800s. Wealthy families grew it in their kitchen gardens because having fresh vegetables in early spring, before almost anything else was growing, was incredibly valuable. It was a status symbol in a way, because it showed you had the knowledge and the patience to grow something that rewarded you generously year after year. Then annual crops took over. The big seed companies grew. The culture of buying new seeds every spring became normal, and Sea Kale quietly disappeared from most gardens. But here is the thing. The plant did not go anywhere. It is still out there. It is still just as productive and just as easy to grow. You just have to know to look for it. Plant number 2. Skirret. If Sea Kale is the forgotten vegetable of English gardens, skirret is the forgotten vegetable of the entire Western world. This plant was once so popular in Europe that it was considered one of the most desirable root vegetables a gardener could grow. Roman emperors reportedly loved it. Medieval farmers grew it widely. And by the time the 1900s rolled around, it had almost completely vanished from gardens and kitchens. Why? The potato happened. When potatoes arrived from the Americas and spread across Europe, they were easier to grow in large quantities, easier to store, and could feed more people per acre. Slowly, traditional root vegetables like skirret got pushed aside, not because they were inferior in nutrition or flavor, just because something louder came along. Skirret is a perennial plant that produces clusters of long, thin, white roots. They are sweet. Noticeably sweet, almost like parsnip mixed with a hint of something floral. You can roast them, boil them, add them to soups, or eat them raw when they are young. The flavor is genuinely delightful, and most people who try skirret for the first time are immediately confused about why they have never seen it in a grocery store. The answer, again, is that it was never designed to be a grocery store crop. It does not produce a single giant uniform root like a carrot that can be washed, bagged, and put on a shelf. It produces a cluster of roots that need to be separated and cleaned. It requires knowledge. It requires relationship with the plant. And somewhere along the way, we decided that was too complicated. But in a home garden, skirret is wonderful. You plant it once, and every year it comes back with a fresh harvest of those sweet roots. You dig up what you need, leave the rest, and the plant keeps going. You can also divide the clumps and spread them around your garden over time, which means one original plant can eventually feed your whole yard. There is something almost rebellious about growing skirret today. You are reaching past the last 100 years of agricultural shortcuts and connecting with something that fed people for centuries. Something that tasted good, grew reliably, and asked almost nothing in return. And before we go further, I want to make you a promise. At the end of this video, I'm going to give you access to something called the Lazy Gardener's Cheat Sheet. It has the botanical names, clear photos, and growing notes for every single plant in this video, all in one place. So if you are the kind of person who always says, "I want to start, but I don't know where to begin," this cheat sheet was made for you. Keep watching because I will tell you exactly how to get it for free. Plant number 3, Good King Henry. This one has a name that sounds like a fairy tale, and in many ways it is. Good King Henry is a perennial plant that was grown all across Europe for centuries as a reliable, easy, highly nutritious food source. It was especially popular in cottage gardens, which were the small plots of land that ordinary working families used to supplement their food supply. These were not wealthy people with large estates and professional gardeners. These were regular families who needed something they could plant once and count on every year without much fuss. Good King Henry was that plant. It grows in almost any soil. It tolerates shade, which is rare and incredibly useful in a garden where trees or buildings block the sun. It spreads slowly and steadily on its own, and it produces edible leaves from early spring all the way through summer, giving you a long harvest window that most annual vegetables simply cannot match. The leaves taste similar to spinach, maybe a little earthier and more mineral-rich. You can cook them exactly like spinach, sauté them in butter, add them to pasta, stir them into soups, or wilt them down as a side dish. The young shoots in early spring can be eaten more like asparagus, lightly steamed or roasted. What makes Good King Henry so important is not just that it is edible, it is that it is exceptionally nutritious. The leaves are high in iron, calcium, and vitamins, and studies have confirmed what traditional communities already knew through centuries of experience. This was not just food, this was medicine in vegetable form, and yet you will not find it in any supermarket. You will not find it in most seed catalogs. You will not find it in most gardening books published after 1950. It got left behind when agriculture went industrial, and nobody really came back for it. Until now. Plant number 4, Scorzonera. Here is a plant with a dramatic name and an even more dramatic history. Scorzonera is a perennial root vegetable that has been grown in European gardens since the 1500s. The root is long and black on the outside, creamy white on the inside, and when you cook it, the flavor is gentle, slightly sweet, with a hint of something that some people describe as oyster-like or artichoke-like. It is subtle and sophisticated in a way that most common vegetables are not. For a long time, scorzonera was considered a vegetable for people with refined taste. It appeared in fancy European cookbooks. It was grown in the gardens of estates, and it was also used medicinally, with traditional healers believing it had properties that supported the liver and helped with various ailments. The plant itself is incredibly easy to grow once you understand one thing. It is slow. The roots take a full growing season, sometimes 2, to reach a good size. That patience is exactly why it disappeared from modern agriculture. We want fast. We want uniform. We want something that goes from seed to store shelf in the shortest time possible. But scorzonera does not work on our schedule. It works on its own schedule. And if you are willing to give it the time it needs, it rewards you with a harvest that almost nobody else is producing in their home garden. One of the most interesting things about scorzonera is that you do not have to dig up the whole root at once. You can harvest pieces of the root and leave the rest in the ground. The plant will keep growing. This makes it almost more like a perennial root crop than an annual one, and with good management, a patch of scorzonera can produce for many years. Plant number 5, Caucasian spinach. Most people have heard of spinach. Very few people have heard of Caucasian spinach, which is a shame, because in terms of pure productivity and ease of growing, they are not even in the same category. Caucasian spinach is a perennial climbing vine originally from the mountainous regions of the Caucasus, the area between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. It is a vigorous, enthusiastic grower that can cover a fence, a trellis, or an old tree in a surprisingly short time. And as it grows, it produces tender young leaves that taste remarkably similar to regular spinach. Here is what makes it extraordinary. A single established plant can produce an enormous amount of leaf material throughout the growing season. You pick the young leaves, the plant keeps growing. You pick more leaves, it keeps growing. And because it is a perennial, it comes back next year and does the whole thing again, usually bigger and more productive than the year before. For anyone with a fence or a wall that gets decent light, Caucasian spinach is one of the most practical and high-yielding edible plants you can grow. It uses vertical space that most gardeners completely ignore. It covers ugly structures, it provides privacy, and it feeds you generously in the process. The fact that this plant is not in every garden, on every fence, in every neighborhood is genuinely puzzling once you understand what it does. But that is exactly the point of this video. These plants exist. They work. They have been working for centuries. We just stopped paying attention to them. Plant number 6, Turkish rocket. Do not let the name confuse you. Turkish rocket is not a spicy, aggressive plant. It is actually a gentle, productive perennial that grows in the same family as mustard and arugula, and the flavor reflects that. The young leaves are peppery and interesting, similar to arugula, and they work beautifully in salads, sandwiches, or cooked down into dishes that need a little bite. What makes Turkish rocket worth knowing about is its resilience. This plant is extraordinarily tolerant of poor conditions. Dry soil, rocky ground, neglected corners of the garden where nothing else wants to grow. Turkish rocket does not mind. It settles in, establishes itself, and comes back year after year without complaint. In early spring, it is one of the very first edible plants to emerge, giving you fresh greens at a time when most of your garden is still asleep. That early harvest window is incredibly valuable, and it is something that annual crops simply cannot offer because they have not even been planted yet. The flower buds of Turkish rocket are also edible and taste similar to a mild broccoli. You can harvest them before they fully open, steam or sauté them, and enjoy them as a vegetable in their own right. Again, one plant, multiple uses, zero replanting year after year. And I want to remind you, we are only halfway through this list, and number 7 is coming up next. I told you at the beginning that number 7 was worth the entire video. I meant that. Keep watching. Plant number 7, perennial kale. You might think you know kale. You have seen it in smoothies and salads and on the menus of expensive restaurants where they charge $12 for a bowl of leaves. But the kale most people know is an annual. You grow it, harvest it, it dies, you replant it next spring. Perennial kale is completely different. There are several varieties of perennial kale, and what they share is the ability to keep growing for years, sometimes more than a decade, without being replanted. Some varieties grow into small shrubs. They develop woody stems over time, get taller and more established, and produce fresh leaves season after season without asking you to do anything except occasionally harvest them. The leaves taste like kale. Rich, slightly bitter, deeply nutritious, high in vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants. Everything that made kale famous in the first place, but without the annual replanting cycle that makes growing it a chore. Some perennial kale varieties can reach 5 or 6 feet tall after several years, essentially becoming small edible trees in your garden. They become a permanent feature of your landscape. They provide structure, greenery, and food all at once. And they are so productive that a small number of established plants can provide a meaningful portion of your family's leafy green vegetables throughout the growing season. The reason perennial kale disappeared from mainstream gardening is the same reason most of these plants disappeared. It does not fit the seed packet business model. You buy it once, plant it once, and it feeds you for a decade. That is terrible for the people selling seeds and wonderful for the people growing food. This is one of those plants that once you have it growing in your garden, you will wonder how you ever gardened without it. Plant number 8, lovage. Lovage is a giant. Not metaphorically, literally. This plant can grow 6 feet tall, sometimes taller in a single season. It is dramatic and impressive, and a little bit startling if you plant it without knowing what to expect. But beyond its size, lovage is one of the most useful perennial plants you can have in a garden. Every part of lovage is edible. The leaves taste intensely of celery, only stronger and more complex. A small handful of lovage leaves can replace a whole bunch of celery in a soup or stew. The stems can be used like celery stalks. The seeds are a spice, aromatic and warm. The roots have historically been used medicinally. This is a plant that gives and gives and gives. And because it is a perennial, it comes back every year, larger and more generous than the year before. An established lovage plant is essentially a perennial celery factory in the corner of your garden. You never buy celery again. You just walk outside and harvest what you need. Lovage was extremely common in European cottage gardens for exactly this reason. It was practical, productive, multi-purpose, and completely reliable. Then the grocery store made fresh celery available year-round, and the need to grow your own disappeared. The knowledge of lovage went with it, but for anyone growing a garden with intention, with a desire to be more self-sufficient and less dependent on what is available at the store, lovage is one of the most valuable plants you can add. Plant number 9, Ostrich fern. This one is going to surprise you. When most people think about ferns, they think about decorative plants. Pretty, green, good for shady spots, but not something you eat. Ostrich fern challenges that assumption completely. Ostrich fern is a large, impressive perennial fern native to North America and parts of Europe and Asia. In early spring, before the fronds fully open, it produces what are called fiddleheads. These are the tightly coiled young shoots of the fern, and they are a traditional food that indigenous communities in North America have harvested for centuries. Fiddleheads look extraordinary. Tightly spiraled, bright green, almost architectural in their perfect curled shape. And they taste wonderful, somewhere between asparagus and green beans, with a slightly grassy, fresh spring flavor that is genuinely unique. The harvest window for fiddleheads is short. You have about a week or two each spring to pick them before they unfurl into full fronds. But during that window, an established patch of ostrich ferns can provide a generous harvest of one of the most visually striking and nutritionally valuable spring vegetables you will ever eat. After the fiddlehead season, the ferns continue to grow into their full, beautiful shape, creating a lush, structural backdrop in your garden throughout summer and fall. They die back in winter and return reliably each spring, spreading gradually over time into impressive clumps. This is a plant that earns its space in your garden twice. Once as a food producer in spring, and once as a beautiful, structural garden plant for the rest of the year. Plant number 10, Oka. And here it is, the plant that gardeners in the 1800s called one of their most treasured possessions. The plant that once grew in gardens across South America, New Zealand, and parts of Europe and Asia. Beloved for its productivity, its flavor, and its almost magical ability to thrive in conditions that would defeat most other crops. Oka. Oka is a perennial tuber, meaning it produces underground roots that you harvest and eat, similar to a potato. But oka is not a potato. It is brighter, more colorful, more interesting, and in many ways more nutritious. The tubers come in a range of colors: red, orange, yellow, white, pink, and they have a flavor that shifts depending on how you treat them after harvest. Freshly dug oka has a slightly tangy, lemony quality because of the oxalic acid in the tubers. But if you leave the tubers in sunlight for a few days after harvest, a process called sweetening, the oxalic acid breaks down and the flavor becomes sweet and mild. Traditional communities in the Andes where oka originated have known this for thousands of years. They spread the tubers out in the sun after harvest as a standard practice, allowing the flavor to develop perfectly before cooking. You can roast oka, boil it, fry it, slice it raw into salads, or simply eat it like a snack. The flavor and texture are genuinely wonderful, and the color variety makes it one of the most visually appealing root vegetables you can grow. Oka was introduced to Europe in the mid-1800s with great excitement. Horticulturalists believed it had the potential to become as important as the potato. It was praised for its productivity and its ability to grow in poor soils and difficult conditions. And for a brief period, it seemed like oka might genuinely reshape what people were growing and eating. Then it did not. For complex agricultural and cultural reasons, oka never fully caught on in Europe and gradually faded from most Western gardens. But in New Zealand, it took hold and remained popular, where it is still grown and eaten today. And in South America, it never left. It has been cultivated continuously for over 8,000 years in the Andes, which is about as strong an endorsement as a food plant can receive. For a home gardener, oka is extraordinary. It is productive, low maintenance, beautiful, and delicious. It comes back year after year. It grows in a wide range of climates and soil types. and it connects you to one of the oldest and most enduring food traditions on Earth. The reason you have probably never heard of it is not because it is inferior. It is because it does not fit the modern industrial model of agriculture, just like every other plant on this list. It requires knowledge to grow well. It rewards the gardener who understands it, and it provides something that no grocery store can offer because no grocery store carries it. Bringing it all together, look at what we have covered today. 10 plants that behave like weeds but feed you like crops. 10 plants that come back year after year without being replanted. 10 plants that were known, loved, and relied upon by people who understood food in a way that most of us have forgotten. Sea Kale, pushing through frozen ground each spring to offer you harvests of tender shoots and edible flower buds. Skirret, the sweet root vegetable that fed European families for centuries before the potato arrived and crowded it out. Good King Henry, the cottage garden staple that grows in shade, produces all season long, and packs more nutrition into each leaf than most modern vegetables. Scorzonera, the slow but deeply rewarding root crop that almost no one grows anymore. Caucasian spinach, the climbing vine that covers fences and produces enormous amounts of edible leaves season after season. Turkish rocket, the peppery early season green that thrives where nothing else will grow. Perennial kale, the long-lived leafy powerhouse that can feed your family for a decade from a single planting. Lovage, the perennial celery factory that every soup and stew will be better for. Ostrich fern, the spring harvesting treasure that doubles as a beautiful garden structure for the rest of the year. And oca, the ancient Andean tuber with 8,000 years of cultivation behind it, still feeding communities who never forgot its value. Every single one of these plants is available right now. You can grow them. You can start small, with just 1 or 2, and add more as you become familiar with how they grow and how they taste. You do not need a large garden. You do not need expensive equipment or special knowledge beyond what you already have from watching this channel. What you need is the decision to start growing food differently, to think beyond the seed packet that expires every spring, to invest in plants that invest in you. And here is how I'm going to help you take that first step. I promised you the Lazy Gardener's cheat sheet, and here it is. This is a free resource I put together specifically for this video. It has the botanical names for every plant we covered today. It has clear photos so you know exactly what you are looking at when you search for seeds or visit a nursery. And it has simple growing notes so you can start without feeling overwhelmed. To get your free copy, join the Evergreen Home Living newsletter. The link is in the description below. You sign up, the cheat sheet comes straight to your inbox, and you will also be the first to know every time we release a new video covering the plants and growing methods that the mainstream gardening world has left behind. This community is growing, and the knowledge we share here is the kind of knowledge that stays with you for life. Thank you for watching. Go outside, start planting. These plants have been waiting for you. Evergreen Home Living. Grow what lasts.